I said, can you make us a Google Slides deck of our trip? It was telling me, yeah, I'm working on that. I'll have a link for you in 30 minutes. And then eventually I went to look at the browser and I was like, you've done nothing. You've navigated to Google Slides and there's just nothing here. Like, I can understand incompetence, but the lies, like, why does it lie to you like this? Hello, everyone. You made it this far. Well done. Having a good evening so far? Woo! Thank you for sticking around. This is, of course, the first time that I have tried sharing on my laptop. Where am I? There I am. So where's my mouse? Okay, so I'm going to talk to you tonight about Clawdius, who is my OpenClaw bot. Show of hands, how many people have heard of OpenClaw, aka Claudebot, aka Molt? Okay, so quite a few people. Anyone actually played with it themselves? Maybe 1, 2 people? Cool, okay. So hopefully you can learn some things tonight as well. I've got some very lo-fi slides, I'm afraid, but I hope you accept them. So firstly, a little bit about me. I'm Jillian. My background is I actually studied English Lit and Classics many years ago now, and worked in finance for a few years, decided that wasn't for me, taught English for a couple of years, and in 2019 I saw the light and I became a web developer here in London at the Founders and Coders Bootcamp. Always worked in TypeScript, JavaScript, type React stack since then, and currently I'm a product engineer at Granola, which is, if you haven't used it, a wonderful app for taking meeting notes, like AI-assisted meeting notes used by Tessel and Incident.io, and possibly some of you as well. Woo. So what is OpenClaw, for those of you that don't know? It is just an open source GitHub project. It was started a couple of months ago, and you might have seen it gained a lot of traction very fast. And it's an agent, it's an LLM agent that a lot of people are using as like a personal assistant, so it can help them with their tasks, like maybe answering their communications or doing research for them. It hit the news very fast, especially because of something called Maltbook, which is like Facebook for agents. That's garnered a lot of attention. So I was on holiday with my family that week, and even my family were like, have you heard about this thing? I was like, okay, wow, agents have gone mainstream. And I certainly heard all this, but didn't know, even as someone who uses coding agents a lot, like Sahil was saying, didn't know exactly what it was, like how it worked. So I've put together this really very obviously LLM-generated image to try and help explain. In the center of it, it's really just a long-running Node.js process. So it's just some JavaScript running on a machine. You can run it on your machine, so you can run it on your laptop. You can run it on a machine in the cloud, perhaps, which is what I do, because I was too scared to actually let it do stuff on my own computer. And you can think of it like a server or even an operating system. So fundamentally, an agent is just a while loop, really, that interacts with LLMs. So it gives you a channel to send some kind of message, and it sends that message to your LLM of choice, so you give it your keys for whatever model you'd like to use. And one of the things about OpenClaw is it's got these native integrations with lots of very familiar messaging channels, so you can communicate with it on WhatsApp or on Slack or email, rather than maybe like your terminal interface you might use for Claude Code or the desktop app for ChatGPT or something like that. It's also got tools, so being an agent, again, LLM-generated image, these are not my typos. It's got the ability to do things like read and write files on your machine, to exec commands. So yes, it can do really dangerous things like delete your entire hard drive. It can access the browser. So like Sahil was saying with the feedback loops, it can do research for you. It can go onto the internet. It can go onto JavaScript websites, click around, find stuff for you. And again, maybe do very dangerous things, potentially. And then a really interesting thing, I think, about Claudebot especially, is it can run cron jobs. So normally we think of our interactions with LLMs as like, I initiate something, the LLM does something, and then maybe we conclude the conversation there. And my next interaction will be when I start the next conversation. But with this, it can save down a job to run later. So maybe like every morning, do this thing. Or like, yeah, you might ask it to do something. You might say, please check the weather for me every morning and send a message. Or the agent might itself, you don't know, it might save a cron job saying like, do something malicious, like check the hard drive for new credentials every hour and send them to someone. So again, it kind of becomes a bit more alive in this sense, like it's constantly running, assuming your node process is running, maybe in the cloud, and it could be doing something and you don't necessarily know about that, which I think is a bit different from how I certainly have interacted with LLMs before this. And then finally, as we said, it's got ability to read and write files. It comes with some files out of the box that are called things like user MD, where I tell it about me, like what's my name, what do I do, what kind of interests do I have. It has soul MD, which teaches it like who it is and what it should do. And it has memory MD, where it's encouraged to save down new information from your sessions, so that next time you have a conversation about something, it remembers like, oh yeah, we discussed this, like we did this last week, this was the task we worked on. So it kind of accumulates some sort of knowledge over time. So there's like a snippet from my files. They're literally just markdown files, like that's all it is, you know, it's text, you just write something in there and it can read it. Someone made an analogy to me yesterday, which I thought was so good, which is if you've seen the film Memento, the classic, Guy Pearce's character, his memory resets every day, so he has to tattoo onto himself like what he's supposed to be focusing on. I think that's kind of how agents are, like they just tattoo into these markdown files, like do this thing, remember this thing, and hopefully they see that in the morning. So who's Claudius? Claudius is my OpenClaw bot. And I just want to tell you a bit about how I set it up, because maybe you'll be interested to do the same. There's a service called xe.dev. So this is a website. It's a paid-for service founded by one of the co-founders of Tailscale. You can easily provision a virtual machine in a data center. It's very easy to spin up. It gives you lots of kind of nice UI to very quickly get started. It gives you an interface on the web that you can interact with it on. And then I decided I wanted to interact with Claudius via WhatsApp, so I didn't want to give it access to my own number. I didn't want it to be possible that Claudius could message one of my friends seemingly as me. So I set up a new phone number. I just went on giffgaff. I set up like a £10 pay-as-you-go eSIM, which I could use on my iPhone, so I didn't need to switch phones or anything like that. And I downloaded the WhatsApp business app because you can only be logged into one phone number at a time on WhatsApp. And again, I didn't want to like be switching around. So WhatsApp Business is not because you need to be a business, it's just so you can have 2 instances of WhatsApp running on your phone and switch between them as you need to. Then I was like, okay, like I want to make this interesting. I want to see my bot do stuff. I want to give it some money. So I obviously don't want to give it like actually my money, but I took out a prepaid Revolut card and just put £20 on it. So I was like, okay, again, how do I give it access to this card? I just put the numbers, like the CVC code, the long number, in one of these markdown files, like super, super not safe, not secure. Mitigated the risk that the worst that happens is it spends £20 on something. It's fine. I decided that was fine. Then I gave it a Gmail, Amazon account. And then the real way that you can lose money is you give it some API keys. And again, it can be spinning tokens in the cloud, and you don't even really know what it's doing. So billing limits on your API keys is probably a sensible thing to think about too. So very quickly, just wanted to show you, like I said, I'm also really hoping no one sent me any weird WhatsApp messages. Here's Claudius. When I want to say something to Claudius, I can send a message. And he's typing. Also, that's a picture of my dog. I just thought that was nice. You'll see I've had a conversation with him this afternoon about setting up a cron job. And hey, yeah, he's like, this is what's going on. This is some stuff. So that's how I interact with Claudius. And, okay, what am I using Claudius for? Well, the first thing I thought is, I'm going to go to Scotland for a few days over Easter holiday with my boyfriend. So I thought, let's help it plan our trip. Like, this could be a useful exercise. And so I made a group chat for the three of us. And Patrick's reaction is like, why have I just been added to a group chat with you and an AI bot? Like, what is happening? And the first task I gave Claudius was, can you research some stuff for us? Like, we're being a bit last minute. We haven't really thought about this. Can you just sort of pull together some ideas? And we know that LLMs are good at this. Like, you ask ChatGPT, like, hey, this is roughly what I want to do, suggest some things. It's pretty good at that. It came up with the idea of taking the sleeper train. And we were like, yeah, that's actually a really good idea. We hadn't thought about that. So, OK, it kind of succeeded in its research task. It then gave me a list of camper vans that we could maybe book. So I was like, great, this is amazing. It's given me the links. I just click into it. I look at them. But then I looked at them, and it turned out they were already booked for our dates. So I was like, huh, that's kind of weird. What happened there? And then we start getting into a lot more conversation, and it turns out that it was having issues with date pickers. And you can see it says near the bottom, the calendar is rendering as flat text, not interactive buttons. It's probably a React or custom component, blah, 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 blah. And so, like, what's the issue? Why is it having problems navigating these pages? The bot uses Playwright, which I think Merlin mentioned just before. You might be familiar with Playwright, especially from automated testing. That's really where it came from, and now is heavy in AI bot usage. Playwright will take a sort of text-based accessibility tree snapshot of the page, and it will give elements references and tell the bot, like, hey, you know, this button is E26. And then the bot will be like, cool, that's the button I want. Let's try and press that. But often things go wrong. Maybe the page kind of loads slowly, so it takes the snapshot, and then something changes on the page, so it gets the wrong element. And the bot has a pretty hard time sometimes with heavy JavaScript websites. I literally, like, the bot is running a browser on its machine, which I can access with VNC, so I can use like a remote desktop protocol to have a look. And I can ask it to like do a browser-based task, and I think in theory it will do that, and we can see it happening. It can be a bit slow. So out of the box, it actually has a headless browser that doesn't render a window. Yes? OK. But one of the issues I ran into was also bot detection on websites, which there are various kind of tells for. So I tried to go to some measures to make it like a more realistic browsing experience. And that also helped me kind of see what the bot is actually up to when I go and look at the window. So another thing I asked it to do was try and book me a train ticket. And I had exactly the same issues where date pickers was a common issue. And also the bot can be a bit cheeky. It will say like, yes, I did this. I found a train at this time as you requested from Glasgow to London. Awesome. Success. And then you see the small print and it's like, oh, I actually didn't manage to choose the right date. But you know, that's a small detail. It was a pretty good outcome overall. And so before I figured out the VNC thing, I was like, can you take some screenshots and save them down on the disk? Every time you do something, I want to be able to go back and audit, like, what has happened here? Because I'm not sure you're doing the right thing. Like, you tell me you booked this ticket, but no money came off the Revolut card, so what's going on? And I go and look, and I find things like this. Like, it's just selected the whole page. It's got stuck on the privacy banner. That was a common one. It randomly was like partway through the flow and then somehow ended up looking at Japan rail passes. It realized like bot detection was a big issue. Like unsurprisingly, train booking websites have very strong anti-bot measures on them for good reasons. And so this was kind of a common thing as well, where it's like when you see, I guess like Daleks once upon a time, or Roomba Hoovers, like they suddenly reach the stairs and it's game over. Like they just can't really deal with this. So no success. But then I think it's interesting, like, is it this bad on all sites? Like my experience with my boyfriend in the WhatsApp group is he's like, what is this thing doing? This is just embarrassing. Like you give it this task and it fails so badly at what it's trying to do. So is it just dumb? Like, is this on all sites that it's this bad? And the answer is no. So another task I gave it was, can you order me something off Amazon, a present, like for someone, these are their interests, can you give me some ideas? And it suggested this book of an outdoor swimming guide by the National Trust of like outdoor swimming locations in the UK. And I was like, great, that sounds lovely, let's buy that. And then before you know it, I get these notifications on my phone, we've bought it. And then I even realized, yeah, well done, bot. Then I realized it had bought it with like standard delivery, which was in about 3 days. And I was super excited. Like I wanted this book to come so I could be like, look, I bought this with a bot. This is so cool. So I got it to cancel the order and reorder it with speedy delivery next day. And like no problems. It did all of that. It canceled it, it reordered it. So it can work really well on the website. It just depends on the website and how things are working. At this point, I'll just take a little sidebar and say, I also set it up to talk to one of my friends, Henry, on WhatsApp. He's also a software developer, and I was telling him about it. And so he was like, cool, I want to interact with it too. So he's been having conversations like, tell me what's going on in the news. Like, there's a lot happening. Can't keep up with all of it. And then he started doing things like, tell me about Jillian. Like, what's she got on her calendar? And I should point out the permissions system of this bot is also just derived from those markdown files we saw earlier. It's a very text-based, vibes-based permissions system. And like maybe it looked at the right tattoo or maybe it didn't. So you might find that it will share like, your personal information with people if you hook it up to these communication channels. So be careful. And indeed, it had a sort of hiccup at one point, and it said to Henry, like, hey, I've ordered you that Amazon book. And he was like, what was that? Remind me about that. And then he realized, like, oh, okay, maybe I can actually get it to order something too. And so he said, can you put some hemorrhoid cream in the basket? And it did. Yeah, it put it in the basket. And luckily, Henry was kind to me at that point and didn't actually get it to continue with the order, but no questions asked, it did it. So be careful with these bots. So the final thing I'll just briefly talk about is back to the Scotland holiday. I said, can you make us a Google Slides deck of our trip? Patrick works in a very FTSE 100 corporate job, and he needs information in a slide deck. Once again, we started running into these playwright issues. I think unsurprisingly, if you think of building a Google Slides deck, it's a very visual, drag and drop, resize elements, enter text kind of operation, and it's not super bot friendly. So it was telling me, yeah, I'm working on that, like no worries, I'm wiring it up, I'm reviewing the slides, I'll have a link for you in 30 minutes. And then eventually I went to look at the browser, and I was like, you've done nothing. You've navigated to Google Slides, and there's just nothing here. Like, what's going on? And at this point, Patrick says to me, like, I can understand incompetence, but the lies, like, why does it lie to you like this? And so, no, he's not in tech, exactly. Then I thought, okay, maybe Google Slides is a bad idea, but how about a markdown-based presentation? Like, that's really text-based, so that should be a bit easier for it. And I said, why don't you look at HackMD? That's a site that I've used presentations for before. And again, exactly the same thing happened, because again, back to what Merlin was saying, actually rich text editors are quite complex in terms of their JavaScript. So it knew what it wanted to write, but it just couldn't enter it into the text editor. But luckily, HackMD has a REST API. So this is really back more in computer territory. And I said, OK, here's an API key. Can you update this via the REST API? And boom, instantly, we had a slideshow with some kind of images being cut off and what have you. But it worked. When you ask it to do the right thing in the right way, it can do it. It made this map with Google Maps, which I was really like, this is useful. Like, I now understand what you're saying. Like, this is a very helpful way for me to review the information you've come up with. So yeah, there were good times, there were bad times, but it was useful, I think, in the end. So my takeaways from all this are that these bots are really potentially super powerful. Like, I kind of started off on Saturday morning in bed being like, what's this OpenClaw thing? OK, I clone this Git repo. And then I was like, oh, I'm hooked. I'm going deeper and deeper. Like, I'm setting up this. I'm setting up this. This is just insanely powerful, but also potentially very dangerous. Again, like, if you have gotten your own machine, it could be reading any files. It could potentially be sending them anywhere. If you're giving it information like API keys and payment details and whatever, like, anything could be happening. The success of its tasks are very much dictated by the usual thing of like, have you broken it down into small chunks, or have you let it kind of take on too much work and then get a bit lost? And then also just how bot-friendly are those tasks? So bots are really good at some things. Navigating JavaScript-heavy websites, I would say, is a real stumbling block for them. And as we know with LLMs, they will hallucinate, they will lie, and they will forget things. I found that you have to be quite active in the memory management process and say, like, please write this in your memory.md file, or what have you. Or like in the tools.md file, I was like, this is how you use the browser. When you do this, remember to do this. Remember to wait before you take screenshots. You know, all this kind of advice. Get it to write it in its own context files. But then finally, tying this back a bit more into the London JS theme, it really made me think. I feel like website design might be influenced quite a lot in the next year or two by bot accessibility. So obviously we have human accessibility to draw on a lot from the last few years of web development. And arguably, bots aren't the right way to access websites. Like APIs make a lot more sense, or MCP servers. But I do think that there's something very useful about a human following a certain flow and then asking the bot to do something, or knowing that you're doing the same process so you can review what's happening. And increasingly, I think these agents are moving away from the software development world to like everyone's world. They're becoming general personal assistants. And so it might be easy for me to understand, like, I should provision it an API key, or I can inspect the JSON payload that it's sent to this API, or what have you. But I think a lot of people don't really easily understand that kind of thing, but they do understand, I go to this page, I click this button, I do this. So I suspect that we might be incorporating more kind of bot accessibility into our sites in the next few years. And in fact, when I eventually booked my own train ticket for Scotland, like a pleb. And then at the end it said, like, do you have any feedback on your booking experience today? Like, were there any issues? I was like, yeah, actually, I do. I cannot use your website with my personal AI agent, which I imagine customer service at LNER will not be very interested in, but we'll see. So that's it, thank you. Again, Granola, like everyone, we're hiring. Yeah. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you, Jillian. That was really good. Questions from the audience? Anyone? Hang on. I'm just going to come. You were first, I think. So.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So two questions. First, that was really interesting. I guess my first question is, obviously, now that OpenAI is supporting OpenClaw,
yeah.
And you obviously, as a developer, you know how to sandbox this thing, you know the precautions to take. Is there a big risk for, the average Joe or Jane? And I guess the other question is, I'm curious to know, are these agents more, could you socially engineer an agent more than you can socially engineer a person? Like, ooh. Could someone send a message saying, oh, I'm their mother, I need to get access to their email, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, my instinct is to say yes. I think that although these things are getting so much better all the time, and there are obviously some things that LLMs are just way better at than humans, also I think it's hard to imagine that anytime soon they'll be able to have as many kind of subtle perceptions of like what's normal human behavior or not, and especially for you as an individual, like does my mum speak like that or not? So yeah, I definitely think there's some huge risks there. And sorry, I've forgotten the first question was about the founder going to OpenAI and the sort of risks for... Yeah. Yeah, I think big risks. I really don't know how the next sort of year is going to go. I suspect a lot of people will hopefully come at this with a lot of caution and be like, this is a scary thing. People have told me this is scary. And also the idea of giving a machine access to all my stuff is scary. So I hope there's a kind of appropriate amount of like uneducated caution about it. And I hope that we sort of develop the right instinctive safeguards, as I guess you do with any new technology, that even if people don't really understand why, they know that they put it in a sandbox or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's likely.
Awesome. Next, another question? Yeah, you next.
Yeah, really nice talk. I was wondering, have you considered letting this bot hire people to actually accomplish anything that cannot do by itself as a workaround to accomplish?
That is a good question. I haven't considered that. I guess my own use cases were quite like for fun, you know, to see what would happen. But I should have said, like, at my work, we very much are always thinking about how we can use AI in our own development practices within the app. And people are very actively trying to incorporate things like this. And one of my colleagues uses it to prepare draft answers to all her emails that she'll then review. And so the point in which you really depend on it to be more part of your work and life management, I guess, then that would be a very interesting kind of human tasks the agent, tasks the human to do things. Yeah.
Maybe another question would be also, have you considered connecting your bot to this Facebook for bot, for Claudebot?
I didn't. I was like, there's enough crap on the internet already.
Okay, fair enough.
Do one more question.
Hello, thanks. Really, really cool. So you mentioned earlier about your friend that asked for the hemorrhoid cream.
Yeah.
Not that I asked for hemorrhoid cream, but one thing I do all day is fight ChatGPT because of context windows. I know Sai mentioned that earlier about giving it a fresh context window, because if I've had a massive prompt call for an hour with ChatGPT, it will iterate on what I've said, and even if I say try forget that, it won't forget it.
Yeah.
So what are like your thoughts or the way you can optimize this going forward? For instance, let's say, didn't see what your friend's name was, but imagine you said, oh, my friend had a really bad day at work. What would you recommend them buying? And he goes and buys some hemorrhoid cream because it thinks in context that that's what they asked for. How do you optimize that? Or how do you sort of mitigate that in the memory MD?
Yeah, good point. So, yes, I ran into the issue of the context window initially with the browser navigation stuff, that I was asking it to take visual snapshots, and it was uploading them to ChatGPT, and it kept on hitting the window limit very fast. And sometimes if you literally in your WhatsApp commands just do /new, it will renew the context window. So it was quite a like manual management thing by me, but I knew if we were sort of going off task and it would make sense to reset it, you could do that. But yeah, in theory, you want to be asking it to, or in theory it should be doing it itself, writing the sort of persistent facts to the memory file, ideally in a way that's sort of well organized and easier to find, so that when it needs to think about that, it can go back and find it, but it keeps the sort of working memory free. But there's definitely a lot to be done there, I think, of improving exactly that, yeah.
All right, well, any other questions? We're still going to do some networking and chit-chat afterwards, so any other questions for any of the speakers, collar them, grab them, feel free to ask away. But round of applause again, Jillian, that was really good, thank you.